Adopted son searches for birth parents. Encounter reveals unexpected connection with adoptive family. Hello, welcome. Leave a like, subscribe, activate notifications, and enjoy this story. In a twist of fate that defies coincidence, a young man's search for his biological roots uncovers a web of connections that will forever change his understanding of family, love, and the invisible threads that bind us all. Marcus Johnson had always known he was adopted. His parents, David and Lisa Johnson, had never hidden this fact from him. They were loving, supportive, and everything Marcus could have asked for in a family. But as he blew out the candles on his 25th birthday cake, surrounded by friends and family in their cozy suburban home just outside of Boston, a familiar ache resurfaced, a longing to know where he came from. The Johnsons were as white as the frosting on his cake, while Marcus's skin was a rich mahogany. Growing up, he'd fielded countless questions about his real parents, each one a tiny paper cut on his sense of belonging. Now, as he watched his mom fuss over the cake knife and his dad ready the camera for yet another family photo, Marcus made a decision. It was time to find the missing pieces of his puzzle. The next morning, nursing a slight hangover and a heavy heart, Marcus sat at his laptop, fingers hovering over the keys. He'd been here before, of course. Late nights spent scrolling through adoption forums, daydreaming about tearful reunions. But this time was different. This time he was ready. With a deep breath, he began typing, "Dear birth mother." The words flowed easier than he expected, a torrent of emotions and questions he'd bottled up for years. He spoke of his happy childhood, his loving adoptive parents, and his burning desire to understand his roots. As he hit send on the adoption registry website, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Whatever happened next, he was on a path to discovery. Weeks passed with no response. Marcus tried to push the search to the back of his mind, throwing himself into his work as a graphic designer and his weekend basketball games. But every ping of his phone sent a jolt of hope through his system. It was on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when the email finally came. Marcus's heart raced as he opened the message from the adoption agency. They had a lead, a possible match with his birth mother. The agency needed more information to confirm, but it was the first real breakthrough he'd had. That night, over a dinner of his mom's famous lasagna, Marcus broke the news to his parents. I've been searching for my birth parents," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The clatter of forks on plates filled the sudden silence. Lisa reached across the table, taking Marcus's hand in hers. "Oh, honey," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "We always knew this day might come. We just want you to be happy." David cleared his throat, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by something more somber. "Son, whatever you find out there, just remember, we're your family. Always have been, always will be." Marcus nodded, a lump forming in his throat. As he looked at the faces of the people who had chosen him, loved him, and raised him, he felt a flicker of doubt. Was he making a mistake? But the need to know, to understand, burned too brightly to ignore. Little did he know, his search was about to uncover a truth more extraordinary than he could have ever imagined. The following weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, phone calls, and sleepless nights for Marcus. The adoption agency had confirmed the match. His birth mother's name was Gabrielle Thompson. She had agreed to meet him, a prospect that filled Marcus with equal parts excitement and terror. As the day of the meeting approached, Marcus found himself standing in front of his bedroom mirror, scrutinizing his reflection. He'd always been told he had his father's height and his mother's eyes, but now he wondered which features belonged to Gabrielle. Would she see herself in him? Would there be an instant connection? Or would they be like strangers? The cafe they'd chosen for their meeting was a quaint little place in downtown Boston, its large windows offering a view of the bustling street outside. Marcus arrived early, his palms sweaty as he ordered a coffee he knew he wouldn't drink. Every time the bell above the door chimed, his head snapped up, heart racing. And then suddenly she was there. Gabrielle Thompson was a petite woman with warm brown skin and a cloud of natural curls streaked with gray. Her eyes, the same deep brown as Marcus's, widened as they locked onto him. For a moment, they both froze, the busy cafe fading away around them. Marcus, her voice was soft, tentative. He stood, nearly knocking over his untouched coffee. Yes, hi, Gabrielle. They embraced awkwardly, both laughing nervously as they sat down. The conversation started hesitantly, with small talk about the weather and the cafe's pastries. But as the minutes ticked by, the words began to flow more freely. Gabrielle told Marcus about her life, how she'd been a young nursing student when she got pregnant, how she'd agonized over the decision to give him up for adoption. "I wanted you to have the best life possible," she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I hope you did." Marcus nodded, swallowing hard. "I did. My parents, my adoptive parents, they're wonderful people. They gave me everything." A shadow passed over Gabrielle's face, a flicker of something Marcus couldn't quite read. But before he could dwell on it, she was asking him about his life, his job, his hobbies. He found himself opening up, sharing stories of his childhood, his college years, his dreams for the future. As their conversation deepened, Marcus felt a growing sense of connection with this woman who had given him life. But there was still so much he wanted to know. "What about my birth father?" he asked, his voice catching slightly. "Is he?" Gabrielle's expression grew serious. "Your father, he wasn't in the picture, Marcus. I'm sorry, but I don't know much about him. It was a brief relationship, and he was gone before I even knew I was pregnant." Marcus nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. He'd known it was a possibility, but hearing it confirmed still stung. As their meeting drew to a close, Gabrielle hesitated, then reached into her purse. "I brought something for you," she said, pulling out a small photo album. "These are pictures from around the time you were born. I thought you might like to see them." Marcus took the album with trembling hands. As he flipped through the pages, he saw snapshots of a younger Gabrielle, her belly swollen with pregnancy. There were photos of the hospital where he was born, and even a few blurry images of a tiny, wrinkled newborn himself. But it was the last photo that made his breath catch in his throat. It showed Gabrielle in a hospital bed, smiling tiredly at the camera. And there, sitting in a chair next to her, was a face Marcus knew as well as his own. His adoptive mother, Lisa Johnson, 25 years younger but unmistakable. Marcus looked up at Gabrielle, his mind reeling. "This woman," he said, pointing to the photo. "Do you remember her?" Gabrielle leaned in, squinting at the image. Her eyes widened in recognition. "Oh yes," she said softly. "How could I forget? She was my patient, the woman who would become your mother." As Marcus stared at the photo, his world tilted on its axis. The threads of his past, once so disparate, were suddenly impossibly intertwined. He realized that his search for his birth mother had only been the beginning. The true story, the one that would shake the foundations of everything he thought he knew about his family, was only just starting to unfold. Marcus left the cafe in a daze, his mind spinning with questions. The photo of his birth mother and adoptive mother together seemed impossible. Yet there it was, tucked safely in his jacket pocket. He needed answers, and he knew exactly where to start. That evening, Marcus arrived at his parents' house unannounced. The familiar scent of his mother's cooking wafted through the air as he let himself in. "Mom? Dad?" he called out, his voice wavering slightly. Lisa appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Marcus, what a lovely surprise. We weren't expecting you tonight." Her smile faltered as she saw the serious expression on her son's face. "We need to talk," Marcus said, his tone leaving no room for argument. David emerged from his study, sensing the tension in the air. In the living room, Marcus pulled out the photo album, opening it to the last page. He placed it on the coffee table, watching his parents' reactions carefully. Lisa's sharp intake of breath and David's furrowed brow told him everything he needed to know. "You knew," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "All this time, you knew who my birth mother was." Lisa reached for her husband's hand, her eyes filling with tears. "Marcus, sweetheart, please let us explain." Over the next hour, a story unfolded that was more complex and heartbreaking than Marcus could have imagined. Lisa had been hospitalized for complications from a miscarriage, her third in as many years. Gabrielle had been her nurse, a kind and compassionate presence during the darkest days of Lisa's life. "We bonded over our shared grief," Lisa explained, her voice thick with emotion. "Me over the babies I couldn't carry, and Gabrielle over the baby she couldn't keep." David took over, explaining how they had learned of Gabrielle's plan to give up her baby for adoption. "It felt like fate," he said. "We had been trying to adopt for years, but the process was always so complicated. And then, suddenly, there was this beautiful baby boy who needed a home." Marcus listened, his emotions swinging wildly between anger, confusion, and a strange sense of awe at the circumstances that had brought him into this family. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked, his voice cracking. "All those times I talked about wanting to find my birth parents. Why keep it a secret?" Lisa reached for her son's hand, but Marcus pulled away. "We were afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that if you knew how close your birth mother had been, you might feel conflicted about your place in our family. We thought we were protecting you, but now I see we were just protecting ourselves." The room fell silent, the weight of decades of secrets pressing down on all of them. Marcus stood up abruptly, needing space to process everything he'd learned. "I need some air," he muttered, heading for the door. His parents called after him, but he was already gone, stepping out into the cool night air. As he walked aimlessly through the neighborhood, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Gabrielle. "I hope our meeting wasn't too overwhelming. I'd love to talk more when you're ready." Marcus stared at the message, realizing that he now had two mothers, one who had given him life and one who had given him a home. Both had made impossible choices out of love. As the anger began to ebb, it was replaced by a profound sense of being cared for, of being wanted. With shaking hands, he typed out a reply to Gabrielle. "There's so much more to our story. Can we meet again tomorrow?" As he hit send, Marcus knew that his journey was far from over. The truth had been revealed, but its implications were still unfolding. He turned back towards his childhood home, ready to face his parents and begin the difficult but necessary process of rebuilding trust and understanding the full depth of their love for him. The next morning, Marcus woke early, his mind still reeling from the revelations of the previous night. He had tossed and turned in his old bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of his childhood trophies, posters, and photographs that now seemed to belong to a different life. Over a tense breakfast with his parents, Marcus struggled to find the right words. The hurt and betrayal he felt warred with the love and gratitude that had always defined his relationship with David and Lisa. "I'm meeting Gabrielle again today," he finally said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. I think it's time we all talked. Together." Lisa's hand trembled as she set down her coffee cup. "Are you sure that's what you want, sweetheart?" Marcus nodded, meeting his mother's anxious gaze. "I need to understand everything, and I think maybe you do too." David cleared his throat. "Son, whatever you need, we're here for you. Always." The meeting was set for that afternoon at a quiet park near the hospital where Marcus had been born. As he approached the designated meeting spot, Marcus saw Gabrielle already there, sitting on a bench. And a few yards away, looking nervous and out of place, stood his parents. For a moment, Marcus froze, the enormity of the situation hitting him. These were the three people who had shaped his entire existence, now brought together by the truth he had uncovered. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. "Hi," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet park. "I think it's time we all got to know each other." What followed was one of the most emotionally charged conversations of Marcus's life. Seated on the grass in a small circle, the four adults began to unravel the complex web of their shared history. Gabrielle spoke of her time as a nurse, of the instant connection she had felt with Lisa during her hospital stay. "You were so kind to me," she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears as she looked at Lisa. Even in your own grief, you showed such compassion." Lisa, in turn, described the overwhelming mix of emotions she had experienced: the lingering sorrow of her miscarriages, the unexpected joy of meeting Marcus, and the guilty relief of being able to become a mother. "When we learned that Gabrielle was planning to give you up for adoption," David explained, his voice gruff with emotion, "it felt like the universe was giving us a sign, but we were also terrified. What if Gabrielle changed her mind? What if you grew up resenting us for keeping this connection from you?" As the afternoon wore on, Marcus began to see the full picture of his early life: the impossible decisions, the fears, the hopes, and above all, the love that had surrounded him from the very beginning. "I won't pretend it doesn't hurt that you kept this from me," Marcus said, looking at his adoptive parents, "but I'm beginning to understand why you did." Turning to Gabrielle, he added, "And I'm grateful for the choice you made. It couldn't have been easy." Gabrielle reached out, gently touching Marcus's hand. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But seeing the man you've become, knowing you were raised with so much love, it helps." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Marcus felt a shift in the atmosphere. The tension that had underscored the start of their meeting had given way to something softer, more hopeful. "So where do we go from here?" he asked, looking around at the three faces that meant so much to him. Lisa was the first to respond, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "That's up to you, sweetheart. We're your family, all of us in different ways, and we'll support whatever you need." David nodded in agreement, while Gabrielle added softly, "I'd like to be a part of your life, Marcus, in whatever way you're comfortable with." As they stood to leave, Marcus found himself at the center of a group hug, surrounded by the unconventional family that fate had given him. He knew there would be more conversations, more emotions to process, and a new dynamic to navigate. But for the first time since beginning his search, Marcus felt a sense of completeness. Walking back to their cars, Marcus fell into step beside his adoptive father. "Dad," he said quietly, "I want you to know, finding Gabrielle, learning all of this, it doesn't change how I feel about you and Mom. You're my parents. That will never change." David's eyes glistened as he pulled Marcus into a fierce hug. "We love you, son, more than you'll ever know." As Marcus watched his two mothers chatting ahead of them, he marveled at the strange and beautiful tapestry of his life. The search for his origins had led him not to a replacement for his family, but to an expansion of it. The road ahead might be complex, but it was paved with love, and that, he realized, was the greatest gift of all. In the weeks that followed, Marcus found himself navigating a new reality. His world, once neatly compartmentalized, had become a complex web of relationships and emotions. He was determined to forge a path forward that honored all aspects of his newly expanded family. One sunny Saturday morning, Marcus stood in the kitchen of his apartment, nervously arranging a platter of fruit and pastries. Today was the first time he'd invited both Gabrielle and his adoptive parents over for brunch. As he fussed with the place settings, his girlfriend, Alicia, wrapped her arms around him from behind. "Relax, babe," she said, kissing his cheek. "It's going to be fine." Marcus turned, grateful for her steadying presence. Alicia had been his rock throughout this entire journey, offering unwavering support and a much-needed outside perspective. "What if it's awkward?" he fretted. "What if they don't get along?" Alicia smiled, her dark eyes twinkling. "Then we'll deal with it together." The doorbell rang, and Marcus took a deep breath before answering. Lisa and David arrived first, bearing a homemade quiche and warm hugs. Gabrielle followed shortly after, a bouquet of vibrant sunflowers in her hands. As they settled around the table, there was an initial awkwardness, everyone hyper-aware of the unusual situation. But as mimosas were poured and food was shared, the tension gradually eased. Marcus watched in amazement as Lisa and Gabrielle fell into easy conversation, swapping stories about their nursing careers and laughing over shared experiences. David, initially quiet, soon found common ground with Gabrielle over their mutual love of jazz. Before long, They were enthusiastically debating the merits of different musicians, with Alicia chiming in occasionally with her own opinions. Listening to the animated chatter around him, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. This was his family, unconventional, complex, and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. Later that afternoon, as they were clearing the dishes, Lisa pulled Marcus aside. "Honey," she said softly, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. The way you've handled all of this. You've shown such maturity and grace." Marcus hugged his mother tightly, realizing how much he'd needed to hear those words. "I learned from the best," he whispered. As the day drew to a close and goodbyes were exchanged, Marcus felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. He had embarked on this journey seeking answers about his past, but what he'd found was a richer, more vibrant present. That night, lying in bed next to Alicia, Marcus shared his thoughts. "You know," he mused, "I always thought finding my birth mother would be the end of something, but it feels more like a beginning." Alicia propped herself up on one elbow, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe that's how it's supposed to be. Every ending is just a new beginning in disguise." Marcus nodded, mulling over her words. As he drifted off to sleep, he felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for years. The pieces of his life, once scattered and mismatched, were finally falling into place. As summer faded into autumn, Marcus found himself drawn more and more into Gabrielle's world. Their relationship, once tentative and fragile, had blossomed into a genuine friendship. It was during one of their regular coffee meetups that Gabrielle dropped a bombshell. "I've been thinking about reaching out to your birth father," she said, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her mug. Marcus froze, his coffee halfway to his lips. "I thought you said he wasn't in the picture," he managed to say, his mind reeling. Gabrielle sighed, her eyes clouded with old memories. "He wasn't, not really, but I've always known who he was. I wasn't ready to face that part of my past. But seeing you, getting to know you, it's made me realize he deserves to know about you too." As Gabrielle shared what little she knew about Marcus's biological father, a fellow nursing student named Michael who had transferred to another school shortly after their brief relationship, Marcus felt a familiar surge of curiosity and apprehension. "Do you want to find him?" Gabrielle asked gently. Marcus hesitated, torn between his desire for complete answers and the fear of disrupting the delicate balance he'd finally achieved in his life. I don't know," he admitted. "I need some time to think about it." That evening, Marcus found himself at his parents' house, seeking their advice. As always, David and Lisa listened without judgment, offering support and understanding. "Whatever you decide, we're behind you 100%, David said, his hand resting reassuringly on Marcus's shoulder. Lisa nodded in agreement, though Marcus could see a flicker of worry in her eyes. "Just remember, sweetheart," she added softly, "sometimes the answers we seek can lead to more questions. Are you prepared for that?" Marcus pondered her words long into the night. The next morning, he made his decision. He would search for Michael, his birth father. But this time, he wouldn't do it alone. With Gabrielle's help and the unwavering support of his adoptive parents and Alicia, Marcus began the process of tracking down Michael Thompson. It was a journey fraught with dead ends and false starts, but Marcus was determined. Weeks turned into months, and just as Marcus was beginning to lose hope, a breakthrough came. A private investigator they had hired located Michael in Seattle, where he worked as a nurse practitioner. With trembling hands, Marcus dialed the number provided. As the phone rang, he felt the weight of his entire life, past, present, and future hanging in the balance. "Hello," a deep voice answered, and Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "Hi," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Marcus Johnson. I think you might be my father." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. And then Michael spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been waiting for this call for 25 years. As Marcus hung up the phone nearly an hour later, his mind was spinning. Michael had known about him all along. He had respected Gabrielle's wish for privacy, but had always hoped that one day, somehow, he would get the chance to know his son. That night, as Marcus shared the news with his family, both adoptive and biological, he felt a strange sense of completion. The final piece of his puzzle was falling into place, bringing with it a new set of challenges and opportunities. As he looked around at the faces of those he loved, Lisa and David, who had raised him with unwavering devotion, Gabrielle, who had made the ultimate sacrifice out of love, and Alicia, who had stood by him through every twist and turn, Marcus realized that family was not defined by blood or circumstance, but by love and choice. The journey ahead would not be easy. Integrating Michael into his already complex family dynamic would require patience, understanding, and a lot of open communication. But as Marcus prepared for the next chapter of his life, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, he had the strongest foundation anyone could ask for, a family bound not by obligation, but by love in its purest, most unconditional form. The Seattle skyline loomed before Marcus as his plane descended, a mix of anticipation and nervousness churning in his stomach. After months of phone calls and video chats, he was finally meeting Michael in person. Beside him, Gabrielle squeezed his hand reassuringly. They had decided to make this journey together, a united front facing the final piece of Marcus's origin story. As they stepped into the arrivals area, Marcus scanned the crowd. And then he saw him, a tall man with graying hair and familiar brown eyes, holding a sign that read, "Welcome, Marcus and Gabrielle." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Michael's face broke into a tentative smile as they approached. "Marcus," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I can't believe you're really here." The initial awkwardness melted away as they embraced, years of absence and wondering condensed into a single moment. As they pulled apart, Michael turned to Gabrielle, his expression a mix of regret and gratitude. "Gabby," he said softly, "it's been a long time." Over the next few days, Marcus absorbed every detail about Michael. The way he laughed, his passion for photography, the gentle way he interacted with his patients at the clinic where he worked. They spent hours talking, filling in the blanks of each other's lives. One evening, as they walked along the waterfront, Michael turned to Marcus with a serious expression. "I want you to know," he said, "that not a day has gone by when I haven't thought about you. I respected Gabrielle's decision, but it was the hardest thing I've ever done." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of unspoken years. "I'm just glad we found each other now," he replied. "Better late than never, right?" As their visit drew to a close, Marcus felt a sense of completion he hadn't realized he was missing. Michael wasn't just a biological connection. He was a person, complex and flawed and wonderful in his own right. And now, he was part of Marcus's ever-expanding definition of family. On their last night in Seattle, Marcus, Gabrielle, and Michael sat in a cozy restaurant, the conversation flowing easily between them. As they clinked glasses in a toast, Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for the twists of fate that had brought them all together. "To family," he said, his voice steady and sure, "in all its forms." The flight back to Boston was filled with quiet reflection. As the plane touched down, Marcus turned to Gabrielle. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything." Gabrielle's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "No, Marcus, thank you for allowing me back into your life, for giving all of us a second chance." As they exited the terminal, Marcus saw a familiar group waiting for them, David and Lisa and Alicia, all wearing matching Welcome Home t-shirts. The sight made Marcus laugh out loud, joy bubbling up from deep within him. In that moment, surrounded by the people he loved most in the world, Marcus realized that his search for identity had given him something far greater than he could have ever imagined. A tapestry of love, woven from threads both old and new, stronger for its complexity and imperfections. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the backyard of his childhood home, surveying the scene before him with a sense of wonder. Strings of twinkling lights hung from the trees, casting a warm glow over the gathering. A banner fluttered in the gentle breeze, reading, "Congratulations, Marcus and Alicia." Their engagement party was in full swing, a joyous celebration of love and family. But it was more than just an engagement party. It was a testament to the journey Marcus had undertaken and the beautiful, complex web of relationships that had emerged from it. David manned the grill, chatting animatedly with Michael, who had flown in for the occasion. The two men had formed an unlikely friendship, bonded by their shared love for Marcus and their passion for terrible dad jokes. Lisa and Gabrielle sat at a table nearby, heads bent close in conversation, occasionally breaking into peals of laughter. Their initial awkwardness had long since given way to a genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. Alicia appeared at Marcus's side, slipping her hand into his. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. Marcus smiled, pulling her close. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," he replied. "A few years ago, I never could have imagined this." As the evening wore on, Marcus found himself at the center of an impromptu family photo. David and Lisa on one side, Gabrielle and Michael on the other, and Alicia by his side. As the camera flashed, Marcus felt a profound sense of belonging wash over him. Later, as the party wound down, Marcus stood up to make a toast. Looking around at the faces of those he loved, his parents who had chosen him, his birth parents who had given him life, and Alicia who had chosen to share her life with him, he felt overwhelmed with emotion. "When I started searching for my birth parents," he began, his voice steady, "I thought I was looking for missing pieces of myself. What I found instead was that I was already whole. What I gained was not completion, but expansion of love, of family, of understanding." He raised his glass, his eyes shining. "To all of you, my family, in all its beautiful, complicated glory. Thank you for showing me that love isn't divided when it's shared. It's multiplied." As cheers and applause erupted, Marcus caught Alicia's eye. In that moment, he saw their future stretching out before them, a future built on the strong foundation of love and acceptance that surrounded them. Marcus's journey had come full circle. What had begun as a search for identity had transformed into something far more profound, a celebration of the myriad ways that love can shape and define a family. As the night drew to a close, with the stars twinkling overhead and the warmth of loved ones all around, Marcus knew that he had found something far greater than the answers he had initially sought. He had found a truth that resonated deep within his soul: that family, in its truest form, is not defined by blood or circumstance, but by love, choice, and the courage to embrace the beautiful complexity of human connection. In the end, Marcus realized his story was not just about finding his origins. It was about discovering the limitless capacity of the human heart to love, to forgive, and to create bonds that transcend biology and time. And as he looked toward the future, hand in hand with Alicia, surrounded by the unconventional yet perfect family he had built, Marcus knew that the greatest chapters of his life were yet to be written. Thank you for listening until the end. Share your opinion about the story in the comments and let us know which character you liked the most. If this story touched you and you want to hear more, click on the next story appearing on your screen. Leave a like and subscribe to our channel so we can build a great community of people who share emotional stories together. Until the next story.